It has that little red. All right, welcome to different techniques to manage stress while dealing with everything else that we have going on currently. I'm going to go through these slides relatively quickly, but you can always email questions. We love answering questions. I do love answering questions. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know. So I think it's really important to talk about this now because we're dealing with so many different chronic stressors. And I'm seeing a lot of patients who are feeling overwhelmed or having difficulties at home, at work, feeling like they can't focus on anything. Sleep is disrupted. They're full of anxiety, depression, or they're just grumpy. Hopefully some of the things in here will give you some tips to help with that. And then if you need additional help, don't hesitate to get in, get seen, because there's lots of other things we can do if this isn't enough. Ideally, you're supposed to have quick thinking and a steady mood, get a good night's sleep, wake up feeling rested, have enough energy to get through your day. But right now, people are confused. They forget what they're doing halfway through a task, oftentimes because they're getting interrupted. And stress in general, especially chronic long-term stress, really messes up your ability to think. For anybody who's been through a divorce or the loss of a parent or some other major event like that, you've already experienced what that's like. You can't think clearly. So currently, a lot of people are super duper fatigued, forgetful, anxious, depressed, feeling overwhelmed by the simplest things. As people are working from home during the pandemic, the research shows that they're working roughly 3 more hours on average per week. But there are a lot of interruptions with that. There are team meetings, Zoom meetings. If you have kids at home, you're having to stop and redirect your kids to make sure that their technology is working or that they're actually focusing on school. And even if they're doing it, sometimes if you're both at the kitchen table, you've got to keep checking to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so your home life and your work life sort of all blend in together. And every time that you get interrupted, your brain has to task switch. There's no such thing really as multitasking. Brains don't do that very well. What they do is task switch. And so some brains task switch and go back to where they were better than others. But right now, every brain is a little overwhelmed with the amount of task switching involved. There's a lot of political issues happening right now. So there's what if my guy wins? What if my guy doesn't win? What's going on with the Supreme Court? And all kinds of things in that realm. And then the recent wildfires were problematic for a lot of people. You're hardwired to, when you smell smoke, go into a fight or flight situation. It's a survival mechanism. And during the fires, even if you weren't in an evacuation zone, the air quality was so bad that it's going to put you in a fight or flight mode. And there's no way to get away from it. You can't take a break from it. It's not like you can go in the other room and, oh, it's not smoky in this room, so I'm fine. I can relax and chill out. That's not the case. In addition to that, there were a lot of toxic effects from the smoke. It was super unhealthy. And that creates a cascade of stress as well. So this is not necessarily, any one particular thing is not by itself a new thing, but we've had all these upheavals in our history as a species for as long as we've probably been around. But if you're, let's say, under the age of 70 or so, and you're post-war boomer or younger, you probably haven't lived through all these things quite all at one time like this in your lifetime. So we're all designed to have fight or flight mode. There are other options that people have as a response. One of those is freeze. You can think about that like a bunny rabbit who like hides in the bushes and waits for the wolf to pass. And that's another response. Fawn is another trauma response. So cozy up to whoever the scary person is and make them like you so that you don't get eaten. That's another response. Look cute and fluffy. And this is a picture of the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. So this is the mechanism, for those of you who are interested in how the brain and the pituitary and the adrenals all work together to release cortisol. And I'll add in here that what's going on in the gut and the microbiome, or the bacteria that live in your gut, also signal to the brain to go through this cascade. So a couple different things happen. This cascade affects the microbiome, and the microbiome can affect this cascade. So that goes bidirectional both ways. So what you eat can cause stress and inflammation directly into this pathway, creating more cortisol, and having more cortisol can affect the way that you digest or absorb food. So normally, if you've ever heard about cortisol, you've probably heard about it as a negative stress hormone. So it gets a bad rap for being a stress hormone, but it's part of your natural circadian rhythm. So it is responsible for helping you get up in the morning. There's a peak in cortisol around 8 in the morning that, if you're not already awake, gives you a little boost to get going in the morning. It drops off a little bit gradually, and then you get a little boost around noon if you have a normal cortisol response. And then there's another peak around 11 o'clock at night. So hopefully you're asleep for that one, but that's the one that maybe in college, or if you've got a deadline that you're working on, it's 9 o'clock, you're starting to get tired, and you just say, I'm gonna just push through it and wait for my second wind. So that 11 o'clock cortisol boost is your second wind that allows you to be up, alert, and effective, you know, till 1 or 2 or whenever, till it starts to drop off again and you get tired and can't think clearly. Cortisol in the short term acts as an anti-inflammatory, and it can give you a boost that way if you're trying to fight off a foe. But if you have too much cortisol long term, it's like steroid. It's a steroid-like hormone, and it can lead to tissue breakdown over time if you have too much of it. There are other hormones involved here. I'm talking about cortisol primarily, but you know, there's adrenaline or noradrenaline or norepinephrine and epinephrine, which they use those terms now instead of adrenaline and noradrenaline. So these things really can give you what you need to be able to fight your way out of a situation or flee out of a situation. And they can give you temporary superhuman strength. Like the classic example is a mom lifting the car up off of her kid who got run over. And that adrenaline and those hormones allow you to do super amazing things when necessary. And they can give you an edge if you're going into a negotiation or a trial, or you have to give a presentation. A little bit of stress and a little bit of stress hormone is a good thing. It can give you an edge. But most of us have experienced a time where we were too nervous about something and we had overshot that peak and ended up being flustered and ineffective and really sort of flopping. So that can happen if you have too much. So a little bit goes a long way. You want to hit that sweet spot to give you that edge to be able to perform, but not so much that you completely face plant. Chronic stress is another matter, right? We weren't meant to have this ongoing chronic stress all the time and be in the stressful situations a lot of us find ourselves in now more so than ever. So any stress, and it can be a good stress, you know, like marriage or having a baby, buying a new house. Those are all really fabulous events, and they're all really stressful. And so they're considered good stressors, but they still create stress. So any stressful event creates these hormones, and it can be a physiological stress, it could be a chemical stress, something that you're exposed to, something that you ate, an illness, or it can be an emotional stress. So any stress gets translated to a chemical cascade. And there are a lot of physical stressors here that probably were common before the pandemic, and still maybe even more so problematic because a lot of us are doing a lot more sitting. So If you're having low back pain, neck pain, that sort of thing, that's going to affect your concentration. Like 80 to 90% of your brain is really just about what's going on in the body. Like, am I breathing? Am I digesting? Where are my joints in space? Am I level with the horizon? Like, there's so much that goes on in the background that you don't have to consciously think about, but it takes a lot of energy. Now, if you're at the computer for long periods of time, especially if you're home and you don't have the greatest work set up at home, your brain will push the pain to the side and say, yeah, okay, body, I hear you, but I can't think about that right now. So having to suppress that for long periods of time takes additional energy on top of that 80 to 90%. Now you've got to shuttle that off to the side to be able to continue to do your tasks and focus and use your cognition for whatever it is you're doing, so that when the end of the day comes, you're exhausted. And that's just, you know, before having to worry about the every other thing in the milieu that we're dealing with now. And like I said, when you're eating on the go, or when you're eating in that fight or flight mode, your digestion is not going to work well for you. So when your body perceives you to be in fight or flight and you've got a foe to fight off, you're not going to spend any of your energy on absorbing your food or making stomach acid. All your energy is going to go towards the muscular system so that you can fight off a foe or you can flee. And so you're not going to waste any time absorbing nutrition if you might be dead in 5 minutes. So, and that's what your body thinks when you're in fight or flight mode. Like, I really have to like up my game, get out of the situation, and it's me or them. So all of that leads to further inflammation. If you're trying to eat when you're in fight or flight, you're not going to get the benefit of that nutrition. The flip side of the coin of fight or flight is rest and digest. So fight or flight is your sympathetic nervous system, and rest and digest is the parasympathetic nervous system. So like I said, if you're in fight or flight, who's going to waste time on digestion? You just don't need to. Like, you just need to get out of the situation you're in. Fight or flight, being in that state, leads to hypervigilance, right? Like, you are hyper aware of other things in the periphery, your pupils dilate so that you can take in the whole scene and be ready to go and respond to that stimuli. But when you're hyper vigilant all the time, like, that takes a lot of energy. If you haven't fought off your foe in 20 minutes or so, or about that time, couple hours, then you can only sustain that hypervigilance for so long before it leads to depression or burnout or fatigue. And it can lead to poor sleep because you're all wound up and there's no relaxation, but you're exhausted because it's been going on for so long. It can lead to grumpiness and short temper. There's no immediate switch. So like, you get a switch to turn on the fight or flight, but there's no immediate switch to turn it off. So you have to sort of ease yourself back into rest and digest by toning down the fight or flight response. Normally you would fight off whatever beast you encounter and you would burn through those chemicals, and then you would get to safety and you'd be like, whew, I'm safe now. But in our current environment, there's no like, whew, I'm safe now. Like, there's just not any way to completely slay the dragon and go on about your business. So there are some techniques though that can help you get back to rest and digest. When you have chronic stress, it actually changes the neural networks in your brain. So just like if you're hiking and there's a path and that path has been used a lot, it's going to be easier to go down that path. It's going to be faster than trying to cut a new path someplace else. The same thing happens with your nervous system. If you're used to that stress, you keep going down that same path and setting off all those chemicals. And that makes it harder to overcome in some ways because that's, you're primed for that. That pathway's worn and your body knows how to do that. So it's just going to keep doing that. Over time, this can lead to the brain shrinking, and you get a lot of symptoms with that, including sleep disturbance, mood disturbance, forgetfulness, headaches, body pain, all kinds of things. So there's a video here, and I put the link in there for the YouTube video It's about 4 minutes long, and I really think it's worth watching because it shows really how the body responds to neurotransmitters and stress and what it does to the brain, and some things to mitigate it and what you can do to help yourself if you're dealing with chronic stress. And like I said, chronic pain is a chronic stress. Chronic pain will create similar changes to the brain as chronic stress will. And it creates higher levels of inflammation. It's a constant distraction, and it takes up a lot of brain power to keep pushing it to the side. And you end up with a lot of the same symptoms of fatigue and forgetfulness and being kind of cranky. Nobody's going to be super cheerful when they're not feeling good. And I think we all kind of understand that. Anxiety and depression can be a result of trauma or chronic stress. Those trauma and chronic stress can cause anxiety and depression. That leads to social isolation. You're not really feeling super social if you're not feeling great. And the more you sort of isolate, the worse you tend to feel. And right now we're in a situation where we're being told to isolate kind of as much as possible and avoid any social activities aside from Zoom, or at least limit that greatly. And so that's causing a lot of problems for people, whether they had an issue with anxiety or depression before the pandemic. People are feeling much more isolated, which was already a problem in our society before the need to socially distance. Traumatic brain injuries can cause some of these symptoms too, and can disrupt sleep and make people more sensitive to the effects of stress. And concussions and traumatic brain injuries are super common. Inflammation is linked to depression and anxiety. And then we talked about the gut-brain connection a little bit already. And then some people just are genetically or epigenetically really prone to experience anxiety or depression. And if you watch that YouTube video that I referenced before, they have a great demonstration of that. So here we are, we're all trying to cope with some comfort food, maybe with some alcoholic beverages, but that can potentially lead to more stress. So highly refined junk food or comfort foods, depending on what your comfort foods are, can create more inflammation. If you're not really looking after your nutrition, B vitamins that are really essential for good cognitive function and for mitigating the effects of stress, you might be missing some of those. You may not be eating healthy fats that are neuroprotective. And then if you're having inflammation in the gut, like I said, there's a connection between the gut and the brain, and so that can lead to leaky brain as well, which can lead to inflammation in the brain, which leads to not feeling so great and having anxiety or depression. So you really want to reduce inflammation all the other ways that you can control, since we can't control the pandemic and everything else going on. Surprisingly, people think that alcohol still kills brain cells. It does not. It is a solvent. It's not great. I mean, your neurons don't love it if you have a lot of it. So I don't recommend having a lot of alcohol if that's one of the things that you're doing to help cope. Mainly, my biggest concern for most people is that they may be using it to cope and to help get them to sleep because they're stressed out, and that's the only way they can turn their brain off. But it tends to lead to poor sleep. So it may help you initially fall asleep, but the sleep that you get after that, usually people wake up, they don't feel great, they can't get back to sleep, so you want to avoid that. Other substances that you may be exposed to through hobbies or other things, those are important to mention because they are a stressor and can be problematic and cause other problems that make it difficult for you to de-stress. So if any of these are an issue on your list, you might want to avoid what you can from here. So when you're feeling tired and overwhelmed, you really want to rule out any organic causes. That's really important. I don't ever want you to say, oh, I'm just stressed out. Stress itself kills people, but you can also just poo-poo it like that and miss something really important going on. One of the things that might be going on for people who are really feeling fatigue and brain fog, and some of those things can be hypothyroidism, and it can lead to other problems, but it's so easily treatable that you should definitely get screened for that if you're struggling. And, you know, it is one of your endocrine glands, and when the adrenals go crazy, sometimes other endocrine glands follow suit and get dysregulated. So it's important to check there because it's an easy thing to address. Other diseases can be problematic. So any chronic illness is a chronic stressor. So if you have an autoimmune or inflammatory condition or anything causing chronic pain, you want to make sure that you're managing that as well as you possibly can so that you get the most out of your ability to function. And then cancer, sometimes some of those symptoms come on and they're sort of nebulous and you could attribute it to stress. And that's definitely not something that you want to miss. And then on top of that, if you've gone through treatment for cancer, chemo brain is definitely a thing. And those chemicals are super toxic in order to kill the cancer, but hopefully not kill you, but you still have to process all those substances. So let's talk about something a little more hopeful and what you can do to get some relief. On the bright side, all of these insults can be mitigated to some extent. We're built for survival. Keep in mind the fight or flight mechanism is there to keep you alive. So it's not your enemy, but it can be very difficult to manage when it's this chronic, but we're meant to be resilient and to recover and to survive. So please take heart with that. There are a lot of things you can do to help with lifestyle, and I'm going to go through some of these in the upcoming slides here. So one of the big things is breathing. So when you're stressed out, you're breathing shallowly, and that just perpetuates the fight or flight response, right? So if you can take nice deep breaths, you'll stimulate the vagus nerve that everything is okay. So you can trick your brain and your nervous system into feeling like, oh, I'm breathing, everything's fine, and it's all going to be okay. And that can help you switch via the vagus nerve that goes to all the organ systems in the body that I'm okay. I'm not running for my life. I'm not having to hyperventilate. I'm breathing. I'm here. It's good. We're doing all right. And that can help you switch out of the fight or flight mode into the rest and digest mode. Exercise is really important, and that's a challenge right now because people are so divided between home and work duties, and stuff isn't open, and now it's starting to get colder, and I myself am a fair weather outdoor exerciser. So being cooped up in the house makes it a little more challenging, but this is super important. Exercise generates serotonin and endorphins, which are both feel good neurotransmitters and very important for mood. When you exercise, you burn through some of those fight or flight hormones and you simulate the fight or flee scenario so that you burn through those things. For people who have a stressor, who were normally very resilient and agile and didn't have a lot of chronic stress growing up or other times in their lives, those people have hormones, stress hormones that stay on board for 4 to 6 hours before your body breaks them down, provided that you don't have an additional stressor that occurs in that time period, because if that happens, you restart the clock. But those who grew up in a stressful scenario as young people, with a difficult home life, maybe growing up or what have you, those people, because that path has been so well worn so many times, it takes them longer to burn through those chemicals. So that's 48 to 72 hours that they're experiencing those fight or flight hormones. And that's, again, assuming that you're not having another stressor during that time, because again, it just restarts the clock. For exercise, it's really important to pick something that you enjoy. That's a little challenging for me because the things I used to like to do were ballroom dance or drop-in volleyball or things that were with other people. Now, currently, I'm doing more kettlebells and weights because I can do that at home. It doesn't take up much space. I don't have to go outside. So as much as you can, do whatever you can do. Meditative exercises count. So Tai Chi or Qigong may be more appropriate for some people, especially if meditation is not your thing. So those can be done individually or around other people. You can definitely do them outside. And then meditation. So in this, I included prayer, which is a form of meditation, and art. So anything that involves a creative process. So for instance, I use knitting, and I make little mantras that I say to myself to sort of get the negative thoughts out. And then I replace those with more positive things as I go along doing a task that's repetitive and doesn't require a lot of brain power on my part. But not everybody does well with the traditional clear your mind type of meditation. If you have PTSD or you are hyper vigilant because of the amount of stress that you're under, as soon as you start to clear your mind, all these thoughts about where's the door, what could happen next, all these thoughts, and what do I have to do, all start to flood in. It's just not possible for some people to overcome that pile of stuff that floods in when you try to clear your mind. So that's where I think moving meditation may be better for you. And there are lots of free YouTube videos for Tai Chi or Qigong or things you can do there. And I really love the book Chop Wood, Carry Water. It is somewhat dated. I think it was put out in the 70s, but it talks about the ability to be mindful with the sort of monotonous everyday tasks that you're doing now, like how to be present when you're doing the dishes, for instance, so that you're thinking about doing the dishes and you're not thinking about what's going on at the Supreme Court or with the pandemic or anything else. So that can be helpful. Just to do one thing, complete that one thing, and then think about the next thing that you have to do. Nutrition is not a one-size-fits-all model. There are some things that are unanimously inflammatory for people. I don't want you to feel like you have a craving that you can't, that it's bad if you eat chips or whatever. Chocolate is certainly good for you or can be. So I want you to feel like you have some flexibility here. Not one diet is perfect for every single person. The Mediterranean diet is the best, well-rounded and most studied to be pretty balanced for most people, but different people need different nutrition. And no matter what you're eating, you want to make sure you're in the rest and digest state so that you can take advantage of that. Like I said, every body is different, so you may need something different. So if what you're doing isn't working for you, you want to get in and get seen, because I can definitely help you with that. And there are lots of herbal solutions that if you're feeling overwhelmed and everything else we're talking about isn't enough, can be the next step so that you don't have to necessarily just go in and get a prescription for Xanax or an antidepressant or whatever. You have some other things available to you before you need to get to that point. And there's nothing wrong with that, especially right now, but there may be other options available to you, especially if you're reluctant to go that route. One of my favorites is ashwagandha. That's pretty gentle and has been shown clinically to reduce cortisol time and again in different situations. Sleep is super important. You're not going to get anywhere if you're not sleeping. So if you're not sleeping, you need to find out why. You want to rule out apnea. If you're perimenopausal and you're having hot flashes that keep you awake, that's definitely something I have a lot of success with. And you want to address the adrenals or anything else that's keeping you up at night. I always start people with a basic sleep hygiene protocol, and it's listed here. So you can start with these things and try to get a little more sleep and better quality sleep so that you can feel rested. You want to address any chronic pain. Any chronic pain you have can get worse for sure during stressful periods. So, and it's very distracting and keeps you from functioning at your best. So you want to take care of that. There's the YouTube link for you to watch the home ergonomic setup so that you can go through your home workstation and make sure that it's as stress-free as possible. And then chiropractic, massage, acupuncture all help with pain management as well. So if something doesn't feel right, I really want you to get in and get it taken care of. There's no such thing as normal age-related memory or cognitive decline. But if you're dropping the balls right now, that's not necessarily a sign of Alzheimer's or something else. That's pretty normal for where we're all at right now. There are things you can do to mitigate it, but it's definitely doable to take care of it. But some of that's just, it's going to happen. That's just where we're all at. If something doesn't feel right, I want you to get in and get seen. With me, I can help with all these things. With your regular primary care doctor, they may be able to help too. But you want to get in and get seen by somebody to make sure that you're taking as good a care of yourself as possible. Don't just say, yeah, it's stress, we're all stressed. Yes, we're all stressed, and stress kills people. So I want to keep you going and feeling healthy for as long as possible. So if you're concerned about what's going on with your levels of stress or your ability to function or whatever's going on with you, I want you to get in and get seen. So for showing up for the talk today, I'm going to offer you a free initial chiropractic exam. So that's more for you if you're having chronic pain issues, and we'll go through a whole musculoskeletal exam with some pain-free orthopedic tests. I'm very thorough. And that's completely free of charge. If you're having other symptoms that sound more like brain symptoms, brain fog, or you're wondering if you might have an endocrinological disorder, like your thyroid's off, or even if you think it's just stress, I'm offering a free 15-minute consultation for a naturopathic care to see what kinds of things might be helpful or how we could work together and if that would be a good fit. And then here is all of my contact info. So you can send me a message. You can go to the website and get some of the information there. I have a lot of videos out for other health concerns that you can take a look at. And then if you have questions or comments, please feel free to let me know. All right, thank you.